After tricking my husband into signing the divorce papers, I finally became the generous wife he always wanted. I no longer threw tantrums when he stayed out all night. I stopped making scenes when he paraded his little mistress around in public. He was finally satisfied with me, Alara. I'm glad you finally came to your senses. Don't worry, you'll always be the only Mrs. Montgomery. Nathaniel said it wasn't until his birthday gala that things changed. His mistress, Cassie, spotted the wedding ring on my finger and demanded I give it to her. The room went silent. Everyone knew that Nathaniel had designed and crafted that ring himself. I treated it like my very soul, never taking it off for a single second in 5 years. Even Nathaniel expected me to cause a scene this time. He stepped in immediately to protect his mistress. Cassie is just a bit spoiled. Don't take it to heart, he said. However, I just smiled. Fine. It's yours now. I slid the ring off and placed it on Cassie's finger. Nathaniel's expression darkened instantly. Are you really willing to give our wedding ring to Cassie? Nathaniel stared at me, his voice low and dangerous. The ring was a bit too large for Cassie's slender finger. I moved it to a different finger, for her not even bothering to look up at him. Yes, she likes it, doesn't she? It's just a ring. It's no big deal. After all, I was giving her Nathaniel himself. Why would I care about a piece of jewelry? My words seemed to trigger something in him. He slammed his wine glass onto the table. With a loud crash, let go of Cassie's waist and grabbed my wrist firmly. Alara, I thought you had moved past this. I didn't realize you were still trying to play the jealousy card. I was genuinely confused for a moment. Cassie wanted the ring, and I gave it to her without hesitation. Why did Nathaniel still think I was being a jealous wife? Perhaps the confusion in my eyes was too obvious. He let out a cold scoff. You're giving the ring to Cassie without a fight just to get my attention, aren't you? Everyone knows how much you cherish that ring. You'd never give it away unless, of course, you don't love me anymore. He shrugged as he said the last part, his tone full of arrogance. He was absolutely certain that the idea of me not loving him was impossible. Too bad, he was wrong. I really didn't love him anymore. My silence was taken as a confirmation of his theory. He let go of my hand and stood up straight, his voice sounding a bit more cheerful. Fine, since Cassie has it, let her wear it for a while. When she gets bored with it, she'll give it back to you. Cassie leaned back into his arms like she had no bones, wiggling as she played with the ring. Don't worry, Alara, since Nathaniel said so, I won't keep it forever. She looked up at him with puppy dog eyes. But I want a ring too. Will you buy me a new one once it arrives? I'll give this one back to Alara. Nathaniel pinched her nose affectionately and promised he would. Watching their public display of affection felt like watching a bad movie. I felt nothing but a sense of irony. Did they think I was some kind of garbage collector? I shook my head slowly. No need to return it. I don't want it anymore. Nathaniel narrowed his eyes at me. Are you still throwing a fit? I told you it's just temporary for Cassie. I shook my head again. His face turned cold and his voice became icy. Fine, don't come crying to me for the ring later with that. He wrapped his arm around Cassie and walked away. Once they were gone, the guests started whispering. I could feel their eyes burning into my back. I thought Mr. Montgomery finally settled down for her. I guess there's always a new girl, no kidding. They used to be so in love, but look at them now. Hearing the gossip made me feel a bit dazed. It was true, we started with so much passion, and now we had reached the point of divorce. Years ago, Nathaniel Montgomery was the most famous playboy in the city. His flings never lasted more than 3 months, but I, a regular college girl, somehow made him change his ways. He chased me for 2 whole years. During those years, he waited for me after class every day. Rain or shine, the rich boy who never lifted a finger actually made me ginger tea when I had cramps. When I was sick, he stayed by my bed night and day. His persistence for 2 years finally convinced me he loved me. I agreed to be his once we were official. He only had eyes for me. He never looked at another woman later. He knelt in front of his family estate for 3 days and nights without food or water just to marry me. I also endured the brutal Montgomery family hazing, which left my back scarred and bleeding. Just to be accepted as his wife, I thought we would be happy forever. But that happiness only lasted 4 years. 2 months ago, I walked in on him with another woman. I went hysterical and smashed everything in the room. Nathaniel just lit a cigarette and watched me through the smoke with a blank stare. Alara, I've been faithful to you for 6 years, that's enough. I'll keep your title as Mrs. Montgomery, but I'll keep my other women elsewhere. That was when I realized the whole reformed playboy thing was a lie. His suckled, deep love couldn't withstand the crave for something new. But I couldn't let go of 6 years of history. I started fighting with him, turning into a bitter, jealous woman. Then a week ago, he took Cassie to another party. I was furious when I found out and planned to hunt him down. Just as I got into my car, a sharp tearing pain hit my lower abdomen. I looked down. The seat was soaked in a large pool of dark red blood. My mind went blank. A thought I had never considered flashed through my brain. Was I pregnant? I gritted my teeth and called for an ambulance immediately. At the hospital, the doctor confirmed I was pregnant. Because of the emotional stress, I had lost the baby. I needed a procedure right away. My hands shook as I called Nathaniel. It took 18 calls before he finally picked up, his voice dripping with annoyance.
What are you screaming about now?
Before I could speak, I heard a woman's playful giggle in the background. The next second, the line went dead. That night, I lay alone on the operating table. I felt the tiny life leaving my body at that same moment. Every bit of love I had for Nathaniel was completely erased. 3 days later, the first thing I did after being discharged was find Nathaniel's mother to ask for a divorce. Are you sure you're willing to give up being a Montgomery? She asked. My hands instinctively covered my empty belly. Yes. Everyone thought marrying into the Montgomery family was the luckiest thing to happen to me. It was a massive step up in social status. But I never cared about their power or wealth. I married Nathaniel because I loved him. Now that the love was gone, being his wife was just a heavy chain. I desperately wanted to take it off the next day. His mother handed me the divorce papers Nathaniel had already signed. Even though we were married, the Montgomery family never liked my background. They were more than happy to help me leave. I picked up the pen and signed my name, letter by letter. From then on, I stopped being jealous. After all, I only had 1 month left before the divorce was final. Who Nathaniel spent his time with was no longer my business. The 3-tier birthday cake was soon rolled out. Nathaniel walked down from the second floor with his arm around Cassie's waist. The woman's hair was messy and her lipstick was smudged. It wasn't hard to guess what they had been doing upstairs. Guests looked at me with a mix of mockery, disdain, and pity. But I just calmly took a sip of my juice. As a generous wife, I was supposed to look the other way. When it came time to cut the cake, Nathaniel naturally led Cassie forward. He shielded her with his arm, and they held the knife together to cut the first slice. Nathaniel, I want to spend every birthday with you from now on, okay? Cassie put a dab of frosting on his nose and looked at him with sparkling eyes. Nathaniel wasn't annoyed. He pulled her into his chest, his voice tender. Of course. Having you here is the best birthday gift I've ever received. I stood not far away, watching the scene with a slight smirk. Once those sweet words and that affection belonged only to me. The gala wasn't over, but I had lost interest. I went upstairs and locked the bedroom door, shutting out the noise. For the next few weeks, Nathaniel took Cassie all over the globe. From the mountains of Japan to the streets of London. From the ruins of Rome to the cathedrals of Italy. Every single stop was a place we had visited on our honeymoon. For years ago. Even the itinerary was exactly the same on his social media. He removed the wedding photo that had been pinned to the top of his profile for 4 years. It was replaced by a cozy photo of him and Cassie. Nathaniel really was passionate when he was in love. It wasn't until the final day of the divorce cooling off period that he finally returned. When he walked through the door with Cassie, I had just received the final divorce certificate. I was about to head upstairs to pack my things. Seeing me, Nathaniel actually looked a bit guilty. Usually, even when he was being blunt about his cheating, he was composed. Alara, Cassie is moving and starting today. Men's promises are truly worthless. The forever was a lie. The promise to never bring her home was also a lie. Thankfully, we were already divorced. Cassie could stay as long as she wanted. Fine, I'll go pack my things now. Finally, I could leave the Montgomery house. Nathaniel didn't expect me to be so calm. His expression was complicated. Isn't this the generous, understanding wife he always wanted? But seeing me like this, not shouting, not crying, made him feel uneasy. Quickly convinced himself that I was just being good. Because I was afraid of losing him for good. He thought I was burying all my pain deep inside. Don't worry. Cassie is only staying for a few months. You're still the lady of this house. I froze at his sudden promise. Then a soft laugh escaped my throat. The lady of the house, not anymore.
Cassie
placed her hands on her stomach and spoke in a small, fragile voice. Alara, I'm not trying to take your place. But I'm carrying Nathaniel's first child. I can't take any risks. Once the baby is born safely, we'll leave. My eyes instinctively dropped to her stomach. Cassie was pregnant even though I didn't love Nathaniel anymore. My nails dug into my palms. A month ago, I lost my baby. Now Nathaniel already had a new one. Pain surged through my heart, not for Nathaniel, but for the child that no one but me knew had existed. Maybe the pain on my face was too
Obvious.
Nathaniel immediately stepped in front of Cassie to shield her. We've been married for 4 years without a child. My family has been pressuring us constantly. Now that Cassie is pregnant, I can finally give them an answer. I force the tears back and try to keep my voice steady. I understand. Without waiting for their reaction, I turned and went upstairs. I packed all my personal belongings into a suitcase. As I was heading down, I ran into Cassie. She saw the suitcase and a glint of triumph flashed in her eyes, though she tried to sound concerned. "Oh, Alara, are you running away from home? I really won't steal Nathaniel from you. You don't have to. Nathaniel isn't here. You don't have to put on an act." Interrupted. She was young, and her ambition was written all over her face. Only a man blinded by lust like Nathaniel wouldn't see it. Seeing I had called her out, she dropped the act and put on a haughty expression. "Your tactics have improved. Playing hard to get to make Nathaniel soft-hearted, huh?" I frowned. "Nathaniel and I are already divorced." A look of pure joy erupted on Cassie's face. But a second later, she looked at me suspiciously. "Divorced you? Just give up the title of Mrs. Montgomery like that." "I don't believe you. You're just lying to make me lower my guard, aren't you?" I didn't understand why everyone's first reaction to me getting a divorce was disbelief. I was about to pull out the certificate. Cassie's expression turned cold. "I don't believe you'd ever agree to a divorce. I'll have to take matters into my own hands." Before I could react, she suddenly threw herself backward and let out a piercing scream. Nathaniel happened to be coming up the stairs. He caught her just in time, his face full of panic. "Cassie, are you okay?" Cassie shrank into his arms, her eyes red. "Nathaniel, I just wanted to tell Alara that I try my best to get along with her, but she tried to push me down the stairs." He touched her stomach with trembling hands, looking terrified almost. "Our baby was almost gone." Nathaniel snapped his head toward me, his eyes burning with disappointment and rage. "Alara, I thought you had changed, but it was all an act. You actually tried to hurt my child. How can you be so vicious? Even if the love was gone. We spent 6 years together. Didn't he know who I was? I didn't push her. There are cameras in the hallway. You can." "Enough," Nathaniel barked, cutting me off. His eyes were cold as ice. "Would Cassie risk her own baby just to frame you? You've never been a mother, so you have no idea how much a child means to a woman." I bit my lower lip so hard I could taste blood. How could I not know? The pain of losing a child was something I knew all too well. "Since you still can't accept reality, then get out of this house. Don't come back until you've come to your senses." He picked Cassie up and rushed out of the door. I watched them leave and swallowed the explanation stuck in my throat. I closed my eyes. Fine, but if I left now, I was never coming back. I placed the divorce certificate on the coffee table after a pause. I pulled the hospital record of my miscarriage from my bag. I tucked it under the divorce certificate. Finally, I picked up my suitcase and walked out of the home that was once mine. I never looked back. The heavy mahogany doors of the Montgomery estate clicked shut behind me with a soft, final thud. The rain had just begun to fall, a cold autumn drizzle that slicked the cobblestone driveway. I didn't open an umbrella.
I didn't hurry my pace.
Rolling my single, lightweight suitcase behind me, I felt an unfamiliar sensation spreading through my chest. Not grief, not fury, but a vast, quiet lightness. For 6 years, I had dragged the weight of Nathaniel's love and subsequent betrayal like an iron chain. I had endured the brutal, archaic hazing of the Montgomery family matriarchs just to prove I was worthy of standing at his side. I had bled on their marble floors, suffered their cold sneers, and surrendered my own dreams to become the serene, forgiving Mrs. Montgomery. And when he grew bored of my devotion, I had turned into a hysterical monster, screaming at the scent of cheap perfume on his collars, breaking porcelain against walls while he watched me through a cloud of cigar smoke with cold, detached amusement. Now, as the rain soaked through my trench coat, I looked back at the sprawling manor one last time. I didn't hate Nathaniel anymore. Hate required passion, and my passion had died. On an icy metal operating table 4 weeks ago, surrounded by sterile lights and the rhythmic beep of a heart monitor that sounded like a death toll for a baby he would never know existed. I pulled my coat tighter around myself, stepped into the waiting taxi at the gates, and said to the driver, "To the airport, please." At the private hospital room 3 miles away, the atmosphere was suffocatingly frantic. Nathaniel paced the length of the VIP suite, his leather shoes clicking sharply against the polished tile. Cassie lay propped up on plush white pillows, a delicate damp towel resting on her forehead. Her eyes were rimmed with pink, her lower lip trembling just enough to evoke maximum pity. Mr. Montgomery, Miss Vance, and the baby are completely unharmed, the head of obstetrics explained, adjusting his glasses as he looked over the ultrasounds. There are no signs of trauma, uterine stress, or placental tearing. In fact, Miss Vance's vitals are entirely stable. Nathaniel stopped pacing. His necktie was loosened, his dark hair slightly disheveled. Are you certain? She fell down a flight of stairs. I caught myself on the handrail at the last second. Nathaniel. Cassie whimpered, her voice raspy and fragile. She reached out with a trembling hand, her fingers adorned with a bespoke, handcrafted wedding ring Nathaniel had spent 3 months designing for me years ago. Alara was just so angry. I tried to reason with her, to tell her I didn't want to take her place, but she snapped. If you hadn't come up the stairs when you did. Nathaniel looked down at her. For the first time in weeks, a strange, hollow sensation fluttered in his stomach. Usually, Cassie's helpless act ignited a protective instinct in him. The ego-boosting feeling of being a savior to a delicate creature. But looking at her now, surrounded by top-tier medical staff who insisted nothing was wrong, his mind involuntarily drifted back to the hallway. He remembered Alara's eyes. When he had screamed at her, calling her vicious and spiteful, she hadn't screamed back. She hadn't thrown a glass or slapped him. She had simply looked at him with an expression so terrifyingly empty that it felt as though he were staring into a mirror that reflected nothing at all. You've never been a mother, so you have no idea how much a child means to a woman. Why had her lip bled when he said that? Why had she swallowed her words with such raw, agonizing difficulty? Nathaniel. Cassie's soft voice broke his train of thought. She tugged at his sleeve. Can we go home now? I don't like the smell of the hospital. It makes me feel sick. You stay here tonight for observation, Nathaniel said, his tone clipped, devoid of its usual warmth. He gently pulled his wrist from her grip. I have things to settle at the house. Wait, Nathaniel. Are you going back to comfort her? Cassie's eyes flashed with a sudden, sharp jealousy before she caught herself and softened her expression. I mean, Alara was so upset. What if she tries to do something to herself? Alara doesn't do things to herself, Nathaniel replied coldly, grabbing his suit jacket from the back of a chair. She plays games to get my attention. She's waiting for me to apologize. He turned and walked out of the room, leaving Cassie biting her lip in frustration. When Nathaniel arrived back at the Montgomery estate, the silence of the house hit him like a physical blow. Usually, even when they were at war, the air vibrated with tension. Alara's presence was always felt, the lingering scent of her jasmine perfume, the warmth of the ambient lighting she insisted on keeping lit, or the sharp, heavy stillness of her resentment. Tonight, the house was just cold stone and hollow echoes. Where is she? Nathaniel asked the butler, who stood quietly in the foyer. The old butler lowered his head, his face an unreadable mask. Mrs. Montgomery left approximately 45 minutes ago, sir. She took a single suitcase. Nathaniel scoffed, pulling off his wet coat and handing it to the servant. She left? Without her cars? Without her jewelry? She left with only the clothes she arrived in years ago, Mr. Montgomery, the butler said softly, his voice carrying a subtle, chilling weight. She didn't take a single luxury item you purchased for her. Nathaniel's brow furrowed. A prickle of irritation swept over him. Playing the martyr now, is she? Let's see how long she lasts in a cheap hotel before she runs back. He strode into the grand living room, intent on pouring himself a glass of scotch. But as he approached the crystal decanter on the central coffee table, his eyes caught a stack of white papers resting neatly beneath a heavy crystal paperweight. He smirked faintly. A letter of ultimatum? A list of demands? He picked up the top document. The smirk vanished instantly. It was an official divorce certificate, stamped by the civil registry, sealed with the government emblem. The date stamped on it was today. Nathaniel stared at the bold, dark letters. Marriage dissolution granted. His brain scrambled to make sense of it. What is this? He muttered aloud. He remembered signing a stack of prenuptial adjustments and property transfers, handed to him by his mother's legal team a month ago. He had been distracted, hungover, and eager to get back to Cassie. His mother had casually mentioned it. Was routine paperwork regarding Alara's status. He had signed it without looking. Alara hadn't tricked him into signing a trap. She had used his own carelessness, aligned with his mother, who had always despised her, to officially terminate Their marriage during the mandatory 30-day cooling-off period. She wasn't his wife anymore. She hadn't been his wife when she handed Cassie the ring at his birthday gala. She wasn't throwing a tantrum. She was literally a free woman, handing over garbage she no longer owned. Nathaniel's hand began to tremble slightly. A cold bead of sweat formed at his temple. No, this is just a stunt. She thinks she can scare me. He shoved the divorce paper aside, and that was when he saw the second document. Beneath it, it was not a legal paper. It was a hospital medical file, printed on thick, official clinical stationery. Patient name, Alara Montgomery. Admission date, September 14th. Diagnosis, acute uterine hemorrhage/spontaneous abortion miscarriage. Gestational age, 9 weeks. Cause, severe emotional stress leading to sudden placental abruption. Procedure, emergency dilatation and curettage DNC. Nathaniel's breath hitched in his throat. The paper rattled violently in his hands. September 14th. The date burned into his retinas like red-hot iron. He remembered September 14th clearly. He had been at a high-end beach club in Macau with Cassie, drinking expensive champagne, letting her smear cake on his face. He remembered his phone buzzing incessantly on the marble bar. 18 missed calls from Alara. When he had finally picked up on the 19th try, annoyed and intoxicated, he had barked at her. "What are you screaming about now?" He remembered hearing a faint, broken breath on the other end, followed by Cassie's giggles as she pulled him toward the pool. He had hung up the phone and switched it off for the rest of the night. While he was laughing, while he was wrapped around another woman, Alara was lying in a pool of her own dark blood on the leather seat of her car, clutching her stomach, calling his name 18 times. She had laid on an operating table alone. She had felt the life they created, together being scraped out of her body, completely isolated in the dark. You've never been a mother, so you have no idea how much a child means to a woman. His own words echoed back in his mind, echoing with a cruelty so profound, so monstrous, that Nathaniel felt his knees buckle. He slammed his hand against the coffee table to keep from falling, knocking over the crystal decanter. It shattered on the floor, drowning the room in the sharp, bitter scent of alcohol. No, he whispered, his voice cracking, tears abruptly spilling over his eyes. "Alara, our baby. Bring me the security footage from the upper hallway." Nathaniel roared, bursting into the Manor's security control room like a madman. The security guards scrambled, startled by the sight of their usually stoic, arrogant boss. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands covered in wet rain and sweat, his clothes disheveled. "Sir? Which time frame?" the guard stammered. "An hour ago. The staircase landing." The guard quickly tapped on the keyboard, pulling up the high-definition feed. From the second-floor corridor, Nathaniel leaned over the monitor, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the edge of the desk. On the screen, Alara emerged from the bedroom carrying her single silver suitcase. She looked pale, small, and infinitely weary. As she reached the top of the stairs, Cassie stepped out from the shadows, blocking her path. Because the footage had audio capabilities, the sound came through crisp and clear. "Your tactics have improved. Playing hard to get to make Nathaniel soft-hearted. Huh." Cassie's voice sneered through the speakers. Alara looked at her coldly. "Nathaniel and I are already divorced." "Divorced?" Cassie's face contorted into disbelief, then malicious glee, before settling into a cruel smirk. "I don't believe you'd ever agree to a divorce. I'll have to take matters into my own hands." Nathaniel watched in horrific clarity as Cassie glanced down the stairs, saw him walking up the lower flight, and deliberately took 2 steps backward. She grabbed her own wrist, threw herself against the wooden banister, and let out a dramatic, blood-curdling scream as she slid harmlessly to the landing carpet. Alara hadn't touched her. Alara hadn't even raised a hand. She had merely stood there, watching the theatrical performance with a look of profound, unbothered disgust. And then Nathaniel saw himself enter the frame, lunging forward, cradling Cassie, and screaming into Alara's face, calling her vicious, telling her she was not a mother, telling her to get out. On the screen, the Alara in the video didn't defend herself. She just swallowed her blood-stained lip, closed her eyes, and let him execute the final execution of her heart. "Delete it, no, print it, save it." Nathaniel screamed, tearing at his own hair. He staggered backward out of the security room, his chest heaving as if he couldn't get enough oxygen. He had blamed her for pushing a pregnant woman. He had insulted the memory of their dead child. He had thrown her out of her own home in the middle of a rainstorm. Alara, he sobbed, falling to his knees in the middle of the grand hallway. The icy floor offered no comfort.
Alara, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, please. The house offered no response. The woman who had bled for him, loved him, and fought for him for 6 long years was gone. 3 months later. City S. The air in the coastal city was crisp and filled with the salty tang of the ocean. In a quiet, light-filled studio overlooking the harbor, I sat at a large drafting table, fine charcoal pencils scattered across the wooden surface. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the intricate sketches of high-end architectural jewelry laid out before me. Before I met Nathaniel, I was an award-winning jewelry designer in college. I had dreams of opening my own atelier. I had given it all up because the Montgomery family required a full-time, obedient hostess, not a working-class career woman. With the modest settlement my former mother-in-law had quietly transferred to my account, a gesture of relief that I was out of her son's life, I had bought this studio and restarted my brand, Ethel. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was my assistant, Maya. Alara, the organizers of the International Jewelry and Art Gala, just called. Maya said excitedly through the speaker. They loved your core collection. They want your pieces to be the main showcase for the charity auction next week. I smiled, setting my pencil down. That's wonderful news, Maya. Send over the final manifest for the display cases. Oh, and Alara, I heard a rumor about the event sponsor. Maya hesitated. The Montgomery Group just bought out the primary holding company for the gala. Nathaniel Montgomery is expected to attend. My hand paused for a fraction of a second over the paper. Then, I picked up my cup of warm tea and took a slow sip. It doesn't matter who
Sponsors it, Maya.
a client is a client. Prepare the inventory. You're okay with seeing him? Maya asked cautiously. She knew a fraction of my past, enough to know my ex-husband was a powerful man who had broken me. Maya, I said softly, looking out at the white seagulls soaring over the blue water. You can only be shaken by someone if you still care what they think of
You.
To me, Nathaniel Montgomery is just another name on an invitation list. While my life was silently blooming into spring, Nathaniel's world had turned into a winter of absolute ruin. In the 3 months since I left, the Montgomery estate had become an unbearable mausoleum. Nathaniel had kicked Cassie out the very night he watched the security footage. When she tried to throw a hysterical fit, leveraging her pregnancy, Nathaniel had ruthlessly ordered his legal team to investigate her. The investigation revealed that Cassie's pregnancy was barely 6 weeks along, meaning the child wasn't even his, but belonged to a nightlife promoter she had been sleeping with before she locked her sights on Nathaniel.
She had
Used the timing to trap the wealthiest bachelor in the city. Nathaniel had stripped her of everything. He reclaimed the custom wedding ring, threw her belongings into the street, and ensured she was blacklisted from every social circle in the country. But destroying Cassie brought him no peace. He spent his nights in our old bedroom, hugging the pillow that still faintly smelled of my jasmine perfume. He stopped attending corporate meetings. He drank until his stomach burned, frantically calling my old phone number hundreds of times a day, only to hear the automated voice. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. He visited my college friends, my distant relatives, even my old professors. None of them would tell him where I was. His mother tried to intervene, walking into his dark, liquor-scented office one afternoon. Nathaniel, pull yourself together. She signed the papers.
She's gone.
You can have any woman in the country. I don't want any woman, Nathaniel roared, slamming his fists onto his mahogany desk, shattering a glass picture frame containing a photo of us from our college
Days.
His eyes were wild, bloodshot, and sunken. I threw away the only woman who loved me when I had nothing. You hated her, Mom. You made her bleed during that sick family hazing, and I let you because I thought she'd always stay. His mother stepped back, shocked by the sheer, unbridled agony in her son's
Voice.
I killed our baby, Nathaniel whispered, collapsing into his chair, pulling his face into his hands as he wept uncontrollably. She was bleeding, Mom.
She
Called me 19 times while I was lying to her. I killed our child.
and I
Drove her away. The annual Grand Horizon Charity Gala was held in the glass ballroom of the city's most luxurious hotel. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls from the ceiling, casting brilliant shards of light across the tuxedos and evening gowns of the countries.
Elite.
I arrived early, wearing a simple, breathtaking ivory silk column dress that draped gracefully over my silhouette. My hair was swept up in an elegant, effortless knot, exposing my long neck and bare shoulders. I wore no heavy makeup, no gaudy diamonds, only a single, exquisitely crafted obsidian pendant. From my new line hanging at my collarbone, I was standing near the central velvet display case, explaining the design concept of my masterwork, a silver bracelet shaped like a phoenix rising from ash, to a group of high-profile collectors, when the room suddenly grew quiet. The grand doors opened. Nathaniel Montgomery walked in. He looked strikingly different from the arrogant playboy I had left months ago. He had lost significant weight. His tailored suit hung somewhat loose on his tall frame. His sharp jawline was covered in a light stubble, and his dark eyes, usually filled with supreme confidence, were shadowed by deep, hollow circles. He was holding a small, velvet-lined box tightly in his right hand. He wasn't looking at the wealthy heiresses waving to him. He wasn't looking at the city officials bowing their heads. His eyes swept frantically across the ballroom until they locked onto me. The air in his lungs visibly hitched. He moved toward me like a drowning man catching sight of a lifeboat. He pushed past security, ignored the reporters, and stopped 3 feet away from my display case. "Alara," he gasped out. His voice was raw, trembling, laced with an emotion so heavy it threatened to collapse the room. The surrounding guests began to whisper, "Is that Mr. Montgomery? Why is he looking at the designer like that? Isn't she his ex-wife? The one who gave away her ring?" I did not flinch. I did not turn away. I stood tall, offering him a polite, professional smile, the exact same smile I offered to every potential buyer in the room. "Good evening, Mr. Montgomery," I said, my voice smooth, calm, and utterly devoid of ripple. "Welcome to the Ethel exhibition. Are you interested in purchasing any of our pieces tonight?" Nathaniel reeled back as if I had struck him across the face with an iron bar. He stared at me, searching my eyes for hatred, for anger, for bitterness, anything he could grab onto, anything he could beg forgiveness for. But he found nothing. My eyes were a clear, motionless pool of water. "Alara, please," he choked out, stepping closer. The powerful CEO, the legendary playboy who had knelt for 3 days to marry me, was now trembling before me in front of hundreds of high society onlookers. "Don't talk to me like a stranger, please. I know everything." He reached out, his shaking hands opening the velvet box in his grip. Inside lay the bespoke ring he had handcrafted years ago, the ring I had slipped onto Cassie's finger without a second thought. "I got it back," Nathaniel sobbed softly, completely unconcerned that the elite of City S were watching him break down. "I kicked Cassie out. She lied about everything. I watched the security tape, Alara. I saw what she did. I saw what I did to you." He took a sharp, agonizing breath, tears spilling down his pale cheeks. And I saw the medical report." The room went dead silent. Even the string quartet stopped playing. Nathaniel fell to his knees right there on the polished marble floor, right at my feet. "I'm sorry," he wept, pressing the velvet box against his chest. "I didn't answer the phone. You were alone, our baby. I was a monster, Alara. A blind, arrogant monster. Please punish me. Slap me, ruin me. Take everything I own. But don't look at me like you don't know who I am." I looked down at the man kneeling at my feet. Months ago, this sight would have made me burst into tears. It would have fulfilled every revenge fantasy I had when I was drowning in grief on that operating table. I would have wanted him to crawl, to bleed, to suffer as I suffered. But looking at him now, I felt no satisfaction. I felt no triumph. I only felt a quiet, profound pity for a man who didn't understand that some things, once broken, do not leave behind fragments to rebuild. They turn to dust and blow away. I slowly took a step forward, bending down slightly, so only he could hear my
voice.
"Nathaniel," I whispered gently. He looked up, a faint, desperate spark of hope flashing in his wet eyes. "Alara? Do you know why I was able to leave that ring on Cassie's finger without shedding a single tear?" I asked softly. He shook his head, his lips trembling. "Because the man who knelt in the rain for 3 days to marry me died a long time ago," I said, my tone as peaceful as a moonlight night. The man standing in front of me at that birthday gala was just a stranger wearing his face.
"I
didn't give your ring to Cassie out of jealousy, Nathaniel," I gave it to her because it belonged to a dead memory, and I don't keep trash in my life. Nathaniel's breath caught in his throat. He looked as though his soul was being ripped from his ribs. And as for our child, my voice softened further, carrying a quiet, sacred
dignity.
I grieved for my baby. I wept, I bled, and I buried that love in the cold dark. My baby was spared from having a father who would ignore its mother's dying cries for the sake of a cheap fling. My child died in peace, and so did my love for you. I stood back up to my full height, smoothing the front of my silk gown. I don't hate you, Nathaniel. Hating you would mean you still matter to me.
But
You don't. You are just a corporate sponsor at my art exhibition. I turned to Maya, who was standing nearby with her mouth slightly open. Maya, please call security to assist Mr. Montgomery. He seems unwell. And make sure his donation for the charity auction is properly processed if he chooses to.
bid.
Alara, Alara, Nathaniel screamed, reaching out to touch the hem of my dress as I walked away. Security guards immediately stepped in, respectfully but firmly blocking him, holding the sobbing, broken heir of the Montgomery empire back as he sank completely onto the cold floor, clutching a ring that no longer had a finger to
Stay on.
I walked toward the balcony, stepping out into the cool evening breeze. The harbor stretched out before me, vast, endless, and lit by thousands of glowing stars. The air felt sweet and clean in my lungs. I placed my hand over my chest, feeling the steady, strong rhythm of my own heart. I was no longer the tragic Mrs. Montgomery. I was no longer a victim of a playboy's fleeting obsession. I was Alara, whole, unbroken, and finally, truly
Free.